Way back in 1996, Steve Jobs was quoted, "The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller." The storyteller is the man or woman who can communicate, influence, persuade their values, their principles, their company or life mission like no other. The storyteller is the most powerful person on earth. I'm not a fan of Steve Jobs. I think that he was a lousy father, admittedly a lousy husband, and one of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. But he is a man who I have studied extensively when it comes to influence, persuasion, building companies, and most importantly, storytelling. Steve Jobs is one of the greatest storytellers in the history of business. It was actually Steve Jobs who said that Disney is the powerhouse of storytelling. And this, of course, was back in the 1990s when he was quoted as talking about storytelling. And it's just an amazing thing to hear somebody that's so elite at storytelling talk about Disney as having a monopoly on storytelling. Everything that Walt Disney did was a story. Every restaurant was a story. Every amusement ride is a story. Everything on the menu is a story. The different hotels each have a story. Everything at Disney is a story. When you go to those parks and you sit down, you look up at the ceiling, there's a story. And all of Walt's employees knew the stories. You stop the guy who's, picking up the trash, and he knows the story. He can answer the question with a story. Interesting stuff. So back to Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs would stand on stage in front of his employees and the world and announce the latest Apple product, whether it was the iPod, then he killed off the iPod with the iPhone, the iPad, whatever Apple gadget or toy he was announcing to the world, what did Steve Jobs do? Better than anybody at that time. He would stand up there and tell a story. He would stand up there and he would tell a story about how this particular product was going to change the world. That's all that Jobs did. He didn't have a PowerPoint. He wasn't up there talking in cliches. The guy would stand up there and literally keep everybody mesmerized by telling these incredible stories. A story about the product. He stood up there when he launched the iPad, the iPhone, and it was just one amazing, riveting story. So you think about the great influencers in the world, whether it's today, men and women of persuasion. I don't care if it's a person who's got a massive podcast or a person who's building an incredible company. They all have that Steve Jobs gift of telling incredible stories. The bottom line is Jobs had it right. The most powerful person on earth is the storyteller. Well, one of the things that I love to do as a former pro hockey coach, and you know this better than anybody, is I love to tell stories. I love to tell stories about celebrity athletes that I've dealt with. I like to tell stories about my hockey coaching days, my pro coaching days, my amateur coaching days. I love to tell stories about owning my own 2 hockey teams. I love to tell business stories. I love to tell marketing stories. I love to tell stories of guys like Gary Halbert and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Henry Ford and Ronald Reagan. I just love to communicate and tell stories. Now, admittedly, I was poor storytelling. The ability to tell a story is really, there's a blueprint to it. I mean, there's no such thing as a natural storyteller. There's people that it comes easier to, definitely. But you know, a guy like Steve Jobs, he worked at his craft, and he would have been, you know, upset if somebody said, well, it's easy for you to tell a story. Just the same way as I've had to learn this skill over 20 years. When I first started coaching junior hockey and then I got into minor pro, my mentor, Wayne Maxner, who coached in the National Hockey League in Detroit, he said, Michael, when you walk in that locker room, if you want to have impact with those men, you've got to walk in and tell a story. Tell a story that teaches the 1, 2, or 3 things that you want to relate. You know, Maxner used to say, Michael, we're hardwired as human beings. We're hardwired to love stories. We love stories. So if I'd walk in the locker room and I would talk about the 3 things we have to do to give ourselves a chance to win the game, and I would just go boom, boom, boom and write them up on the whiteboard, you know, the retention wasn't there. The focus wasn't there. The connection with the players wasn't there. So when Wayne Maxner told me, he said, Michael, every time you go in that locker room, make sure you connect it to a riveting story. And it can be a story about anything, but that's the only way you're going to be memorable as a teacher. So I was a lousy story I didn't know what to do, and I was nervous, and I didn't have any stories and all this other stuff. But I kept practicing, and I kept reading biographies. And as I studied great coaches and watched videos and read books, all of a sudden I started to collect great stories. Some of them were sports stories, some of them were business stories, some of them were, you know, different life stories. But this is the thing, it's a craft that you can become slowly good at. And then, like Jobs said, then you've got the most powerful skill. You've got the most powerful skill in the world in your back pocket. You know, how I've noticed this, you know, after Maxner said that, the better the storyteller I became, the better the hockey coach I became. And for guys like Marc-Andre, my business partner, who played for me for 4 years with my junior franchise, the Perth Blue Wings, he'll tell you, like, when I would walk in the locker room, the only things he can remember in the 4 years of me coaching me, he'll recall stories that I told. So I'm no different than Steve Jobs announcing a product launch. I walk in there and I tell a story. The rest of it, the teaching, the hard teaching, it's all forgettable. So your best influence, your best ability to persuade, you can't sell if you don't tell stories. So I've used storytelling in my personal life a ton. I have that saying where go to town with the stories. My grandfather was a storyteller. My dad is a storyteller. But go to town with the stories. And what that's meant for me as a father is I've found over the last handful of years, I stopped, preaching. I stopped, lecturing. I stopped, giving speeches to my daughter Emery. And all of a sudden, I just started telling old stories. Stories of my life when I was her age, getting in trouble, going to school, dealing with bullies, dealing with subjects that you weren't very good at. I just tell her stories that she can relate to. And I have to say, my connection with her is much stronger because I don't give sermons, I don't give lectures, I don't give her the old Tony Robbins inspirational speech. I just tell stories that she can relate to. And it makes it more memorable for her. I talk about the stories of the first 5 years of my life growing up in the back of a general store with my dad working 14 hours a day, every day but Christmas. Growing up in the back of that general store, my mom raising 2 children at the time, and we living in a little village of less than 90 people, and my dad putting in these insane hours, but he had a plan. And just stories, stories of problems that I had and how I overcame them. All kinds of stories. Same thing in your marriage. When Krista and I are out on our weekly date night, I just, I leave my phone at home, and we usually go for a walk, or maybe we'll play some pickleball, and sometimes we go to dinner. A date night is just time. Doesn't have to be spending money, but and we just sit there, and it's amazing that we tell a lot of stories to each other, like stories that we haven't even heard from our own lives, and some of them are repeats. But it's amazing that that's what's most memorable about a date night, is when Krista tells me a story, or I tell her a story about growing up. And it's just, we're hardwired. So for me, if you're gonna dominate in business and you're gonna dominate in life, you have to become a good storyteller. It's non-optional behavior. And no, you're not born as a storyteller. You might have a few skills that make it, simpler for you. But if you're like me, it's something you can learn. So one of the focuses of my new print newsletter, I'm starting a brand new print newsletter. Marc-Andre, my business partner, thinks I have a brain injury because I'm actually going to be killing more trees. And I'm going to be publishing a monthly newsletter on one thing: copywriting. It's my new passion. I'm just studying all the greats, the legends, the Gene Schwartz, the Gary Halberts, all of them, just all of these guys. I'm just studying them. And I want to share it with you in a monthly print. It's a physical newsletter. It's going to be in your mailbox, paper and ink. I'm going to kill even more trees. And one of the big things that I'm teaching every month, especially in the first month, which is going to be February, is storytelling, is teaching you how I break it down into 4 little points to tell a story. And if you get these 4 points into your mind when you shoot a video, when you're writing your website, when you're writing an email, when you're writing an article in your newsletter, when you're doing any copywriting, you gotta be telling stories. So the 4 points that I use when I tell a story, including this one, it's so much simpler because it's boom, 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 and you've covered the main points. If you don't do that, it's just a dog's breakfast. It doesn't have the impact. So I've been honing my craft of telling stories for the last 20 plus years. And I'm going to share everything I've learned, whether it's shooting one of these videos, whether it's writing an email. Most of the articles in my newsletters, they start with a story. But how you can use storytelling in your business to just blow the doors off of how much persuasion and influence you have over your customers and your clients and your patients. And I'm gonna be teaching in badasscopy.coach. I'm gonna be teaching exactly what Jobs just said in his quote, which is the most powerful person on earth is the storyteller. So think about that. What an incredible investment in your life, where every month you get a physical newsletter. It's like a seminar in print every single month, where it's going to teach you to be a better copywriter. What's a copywriter? It's a person who turns words into money. They can be words out of your mouth like this. They can be words on a screen. They can be words on social media. They can be words in a speech. They can be words on a piece of paper. You turn words into money. But like Steve Jobs said, man, oh man, you're going to possess this ability to tell a story. You can tell stories in your home, at the kitchen table, in your marriage, with your children, with your grandchildren. And in business, everything becomes a story. Everything becomes a story. So that's what I'm going to be sharing in this publication, along with breaking down great old school ads. And actually, I'm going to be sharing each month what I'm doing as far as copy. What copy have I been writing that previous month? What are the losers? What are the winners? What's worked? What hasn't worked? But one of the big components of this new newsletter is storytelling. Every month, I'm going to profile another amazing storyteller in our history. The Steve Jobs, the Ronald Reagans, the Muhammad Alis. These are the storytellers that we need to be learning and studying. And I'm going to do that for you every single month. So one of the things you should be looking at this year as an entrepreneur and as a husband or a wife or a father or a mother, whatever, is, man, oh man, I'm going to go to town with the stories. And I'm going to go to town with the storytellers in my new monthly Badass Copy print newsletter. Listen, it's not for bargain hunters. It's not for cheapskates. It's not for people that are happy just getting by with their marketing. Copywriting is words to money. The reason I'm walking in this gated community is because I developed storytelling and copywriting skills. I can live anywhere in the world. I can take my family anywhere. And I literally sit down every day and I do what? I turn words and stories into money. I turn words, whether it's a video, whether it's an email, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a telegram, whether it's a speech, I turn words into money that pays for all of this. So that's the freedom and personal sovereignty that copywriting will give you. And by the way, you can be retired in 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, and you still have that storytelling skill in your back pocket. You have a copywriting skill in your back pocket. So if you want to take a trip around the world, or you want to renovate your home, or you want to put in a home gym, or you want to hire a personal trainer, or you want to pay for your grandkids' college education, you just sit down and you turn words and stories into as much money as you want. How many people have that power? Zero, almost zero. It gives you the ultimate loaded deck. It gives you an unfair advantage in life. It's like having an extra player on the field. I have an extra player on the field because of the ability to tell stories, the ability to write copy. I could lose everything today. It could be depression 2.0. I could lose all my investments. I could lose my homes. I could lose my vehicles. I could lose everything today. And you know what? I'd be back up tomorrow getting out of bed, and I'd be doing what? I'd be telling stories, and I'd be writing copy. I'd be writing words that bring me money. That's an incredible way to live your life. I have a level of peace of mind because I can tell a story, I can turn words into money, and I can build a following and audience that I'm like, I make my own economy. If shit hits the fan for MJM, I can start over. I don't want to start over, but I can start over. This is how I live in 2 countries, in 2 different homes, and homeschool my daughter and shoot videos and all this other stuff. I've got personal sovereignty because I'm a copywriter, because I can turn words into money. I've got personal sovereignty and autonomy because I can now tell a story. So if you want to subscribe, I'm going to give you a nice fat discount before the end of this week, but you gotta subscribe now. It's badasscopy.coach. Badasscopy.coach. I have a real heavyweight free bonus for you as well. You'll get my pal Doberman Dan's copywriting 2-hour closed door training he did only with my champion mastermind guys. These are my heavyweight champion of the world clients. My Bill Gauze, Stephen Ivanko, David Linton, Paul Nolte, Mark Andre, Leanne. And these clients of mine, $30,000 to be in this room for the year. And the only special guest I brought in this year, the only one that passed the mustard, was my pal Doberman Dan. And what did he talk about? He talked about copywriting. He talked about Gary Halbert. They lived together. He talked about advertising. He talked about marketing. It was insane. He's from another planet, Doberman Dan. And you get this 2-hour training for free if you sign up today at badasscopy.coach. The link is below. Just remember, like, this is like return on investment. Can you imagine if you develop your storytelling this year, if you become a good copywriter in the next 12 months? How the hell can you put any price on that? I didn't even know how to price this newsletter. I'm like, I don't know, like it's like 1 client a month, 2 clients a month, the ability to literally be free and live how do you price personal sovereignty? How do you price freedom? How do you price autonomy? So it's $300 a month, and I'll give you a fat discount. Okay, that's like 2 of those goofy Starbucks lattes or coffees or whatever the hell they're doing now. A day, it's nothing. A couple of coffees a day, and I'm gonna break it down to $247 a month for people that watch my videos and people that follow me. So $247 per month in your mailbox. It's going to be 8 to 10, 12 pages. So it's going to be a newsletter that you can sit down and you can read in like 30 minutes and start implementing this stuff in your life immediately. Like all of a sudden it can be money in your bank, and you don't have to worry about reading a lot of pages or anything. It's going to be all copy. It's going to be all storytelling. It's going to be all influence and persuasion. You know, how to shoot videos, how to write and create websites, all that stuff. But storytelling is one that I'm really going to focus on during this. Every single month, I'm going to be teaching you how to become an even better storyteller. Badasscopy.coach. Take Steve Jobs, professional advice. I wouldn't take advice from that guy when it came to being a father. I wouldn't take his advice when it came to being a husband. I wouldn't take his life advice. But when it comes to selling, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to persuasion and influence, that son of a gun, I'm going to take his advice. The storyteller is the most powerful person on earth. Badasscopy.coach. 2 words that changed my life. 2 words that will change your life. Be relentless.